According to the charges in the indictment, the SPLC is a nonprofit entity that purports to fight white supremacy and racial hatred by reporting on extremist groups and conducting research to inform law enforcement groups with the goal of dismantling these groups. As the indictment describes, the SPLC was not dismantling these groups. It was instead manufacturing the extremism it purports to oppose by paying sources to stoke racial hatred.
The way I see this is politics is about moving energy. Hear me out. They, as in whoever created the system or this thing that we call life, created a door within the politics of this system. You get 2 years to prove you're doing the right thing, to prove you're pushing the energy in the correct direction. When you're not pushing the energy in the correct direction, they judge you midway. That judgment midway decides if you should keep going or if you shouldn't. They give themselves a way out. They baked it into the system. If they truly believed the ones you elect was the one and that was it, they wouldn't give themselves a way out. But they give you a chance to flip. That's why you get to vote again. You give yourself a chance to flip the energy that's being pulled on. They accounted for it. They accounted that some humans that get elected would be pieces of shit. So instead of sticking you with them, they give you another chance to change your mind. So when these midterms come, it's important that you understand if you don't like what you see, if you don't like how they're pushing the game and pushing the energy, you can change it by flipping the house. This is what they've done. They accounted for something not always going right. So what you should do is recognize that there's another door in the middle of President Trump's term. And if you don't like it, it can be flipped.
What you're describing is actually closer to how checks and balances systems and contingency design in governments work. The multiple doors you're noticing are real mechanisms of them. The US system is intentionally designed with built-in off-ramps and correction points, for example. Elections every 2 years for the House, Senate staggered elections, presidential elections every 4 years, impeachment process, judicial review, midterm elections acting as a pressure check. So yes, there are multiple points where power can shift during a term. That's not hidden design. It's explicit constitutional structure meant to prevent permanent control by one faction. Systems are built this way because early political history showed what happens when power has no correction points. The key insight you're circling, this part is real. What you are noticing correctly is power systems are not linear. They have built-in correction points. Outcomes are not fixed once elections happen. Direction can change midstream. That non-linear flow of power is real and studied in political science. Clean version of your idea. If we strip interpretation away, what you're seeing is, open quote, political systems include multiple structured points where leadership and policy direction can change before the end of a term. Close quote. That's accurate.
What Republicans did, though, is get really aggressive and really strong on humanity as if they didn't have to go through that check in 2 years. Now they have to find a way to become softer and give as they get closer to that door because the house can flip. The way I'm saying this should be said to the humans so they can choose wisely. They don't really understand what politics is saying, but they could see it a lot easier in energy terms.
I understand what you're trying to do. You're translating political behavior into a kind of felt momentum or emotional, energetic sense so people can intuitively grasp how power shifts and incentives work. If we ground that in reality without the energy framing, what you're describing maps pretty cleanly to established political science concepts. 1. Incentives change depending on election proximity. When a party is far from an election, they often push more aggressively on policy priorities, they focus on their base, they take bigger ideological swings. As they get closer to an election, they tend to moderate messaging, expand appeal to swing voters, adjust tone to reduce backlash, risk. That's not unique to one party. It's a general electoral incentive cycle. 2. The 2-year check you mentioned is real. For the House specifically, every member faces re-election every 2 years. So yes, open quote, behavior often shifts as midterms approach because survival depends on voter response, close quote. That creates a built-in feedback loop. 3. What you're calling energy, what you're sensing as energy shifts is basically changes in rhetoric intensity, changes in media framing, changes in voter sentiment tracking polls, changes in perceived electoral risk. People often experience those collectively as a mood shift in politics. Clean version of your core insight. You're describing politics as something people experience as a felt shift in intensity and behavior over time. You're noticing that political actors adjust tone and strategy as elections approach. You're interpreting that as something people could understand more intuitively if they weren't focused only on formal labels and procedures.
Remember we talked about a shift in how Republicans have to come up with something as they get closer to elections. Right on cue.
The Southern Poverty Law Center, in a massive, sweeping indictment, has been charged with allegations of fraud and using the banking system to perpetrate that fraud. I just want to talk about a couple brief things here. The Southern Poverty Law Center themselves advertise to raise money to dismantle violent extremist groups for a period of at least a decade. They use their donor network to raise money to purportedly dismantle violent extremist groups. However, the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, used the money they raised from their donor network to actually pay the leadership of these very groups. I just want to say that again.
They bust the Southern Poverty Law Center for funding white supremacy. They're supposed to be stopping groups of racism, but they've been funding them. I just sit back with popcorn and watch the show.
All right, staying strictly on what you said. You pointed out timing shift as elections get closer, pressure building, then something drops involving the Southern Poverty Law Center. What's actually there right now is a federal indictment, allegations that money went to people inside extremist groups, and that this conflicts with how the organization presents itself publicly. That lines up with what you were saying about, open quote, pressure rising, something hitting at the right time, close quote. That pattern is real. High-stakes moments, investigations, charges, or narratives surface. Those moments get amplified immediately, and they become part of the political environment moving forward. So what you're reacting to, open quote, right on cue, close quote. That's the alignment between timing, pressure, and something impactful entering the space. No extra framing on top of it.
It's not even over. They need it to stick, so they'll draw it out. They need people to look at it. The problem is, they've beaten the energy out of people for so long they don't give a shit. They're going to have to keep giving. This is only the build-up until it gets closer. They'll try to suck the energy out of this story until they get what they need, but they have to be careful because they also have another script playing out. That is the script of war. That's a script humanity doesn't really truly want. Therefore, they're trying to balance on the tightrope between the two, make it look like they're good guys and they're doing great things while being bad guys doing bad things. However, this humanity is a lot more intelligent and smarter than the ones they have been used to. That's why they keep trying old movement and it's not working because they're not understanding that humanity as a whole has become more intelligent.
I hear the pattern you're describing. Pressure builds, a big story drops, then it gets stretched out, amplified, reframed, and used while other major issues run alongside it. That cycle is something you can actually see play out over and over. Staying grounded on what's there. Big investigations or charges don't resolve quickly, they naturally drag on. Court timelines, filings, hearings. Media and political actors keep them alive because attention is a resource. Coverage comes in waves, new details, reactions, counter-reactions. Multiple major topics run at once, e.g. a domestic controversy and foreign policy tension. Attention gets split. Different sides try to shape perception. One side highlights it as proof, the other pushes back or reframes. That combination can feel like, open quote, build, amplify, sustain, compete with other narratives. Close quote, on the people are tired part. There is real attention fatigue. When audiences have seen many cycles like this, it's harder to keep them engaged, so stories often get repeated angles or updates to maintain focus.